Hi guys, Russell here from homebrew.co.nz. Welcome to another brew review. Today we're checking out the BlackRock Dry Lager. I'm going to follow the same format we've used for the last couple of videos, which means we're going to make two brews today. A little bit more about the brew we're actually making. According to the description on the can, what we're brewing is a light coloured and refreshingly dry lager with a crisp, clean finish. Pretty high level, doesn't give us much to go off. I jumped on the BlackRock website. They didn't have much more than that in terms of the flavour description. There were three key pieces of information though. The first one was the SRM, which is our colour. Target SRM is 3, which is really low. So we're going for a really light gold colour, almost a straw colour. Number 2, IBU, International Bitterness Units, was 16. Again, that's really, really low. The full scale is 100, so we're going to have a really low level of bitterness. And ABV, target ABV, 4.5%. Pretty stock standard for a lager, but this is going to be a really easygoing, really easy to drink and probably highly sessionable brew. For the first brew, we want to get this brew on using the quickest, the simplest, most cost-effective method possible, which basically means we're going to take the base kit, we'll use the factory yeast that's included, we're going to use a kg of dextrose, we're going to add water, and then we're going to ferment in ambient temperature. For the second brew, we're going to take a recipe approach, which means we'll use a premium yeast, we're going to use a very specific liquid malt extract, and we're going to ferment using our temperature control. Alright, quick chat about the basics brew. So we said the goal of the brew was to get the brew on using the quickest, the simplest, most cost-effective way possible. We're going to take the kit, we're going to use the factory yeast, which is under the lid when you open it up, and we're going to use a bag of dextrose. Let's have a quick chat about the dextrose. When I jumped on the BlackRock website and had a look at that kit itself, what they actually suggested using was a can of liquid brewing sugar. Now I've since added liquid brewing sugar to my website, but I haven't used it. When I looked at the marketing blurb for liquid brewing sugar, what they basically say is that using liquid brewing sugar, you're not going to get the sweet finish which using dextrose is known for. So you're going to support the dry finish, which is probably more in line with the style of the can, which was a dry lager. What I would say though is that this approach is incredibly cost effective. So basically this basics brew, for under $30 New Zealand, we've got everything we need to get this brew fermenting and make 23 litres of beer. That's exceptional in my books. Alright, let's have a chat about our second brew, which is using a recipe approach. In essence, we're going to use liquid malt extract and we're going to use a premium yeast. If you have a look at the dry lager kit on the BlackRock website, what they actually suggest using is the ultra light liquid malt extract, which would normally be what I would go straight to for a brew like this. Interestingly, also on the BlackRock website, they have a series of recipes. I actually found a recipe for the dry lager and they suggest using the blonde liquid malt extract. When I went and had a better look at the difference between these two kits, basically what they said is this is going to support a crisp, clean flavour. This is going to give us a slightly drier finish on our beer. And I'm guessing that would go quite well with the style of the brew, which is a dry lager. So we're going to roll with the blonde liquid malt extract, also from the BlackRock range, and it's a 1.7 kg tin. Let's talk about our second ingredient, the brewing yeast. I mentioned that there's a recipe published on the BlackRock website. If you go and have a look at that recipe, what they actually suggest using is the Safe Ale US05. I've chosen not to use this yeast for a couple of reasons. Number one, as the name would suggest, it is an ale yeast and it's really well suited to American style ales in particular. That doesn't mean you can't use it in other styles of brew, for example lager. It just means you're going to get best results when you use it in ales. Where this will do well if you want to use it is it's got a really, really nice fermentation temperature range in terms of its ideal fermentation temperature range, which is stated at 15 to 22 degrees Celsius. So it's going to have a really nice level of utility, particularly for those of us who are brewing in ambient temperatures. The next thing this yeast will do is it actually creates a really subtle citrusy tone in terms of the flavour during fermentation. So with this kit, which I'm expecting to have a really, really light malt character, it would just give it a nice subtle level of citrus and probably round out that flavour profile really, really nicely. The yeast I have chosen to use is the Mangrove Jacks M54 California lager yeast, and there's a couple of reasons I've chosen this. Number one, I've used it before and I was really, really impressed. So the fermentation temperature of this yeast, the ideal fermentation temperature is 18 to 20 degrees, which is a lot closer to ale yeasts, and again is going to give anyone brewing in ambient temperatures a really good level of utility. The other thing I like about this yeast is that it produces a really, really clean flavour profile during fermentation, and I think that's going to work really well with this brew. Last up, let's talk about dry hops. If you watch my other videos, you know that I love to dry hop my brews, and I don't mind dry hopping lagers. But for this brew, we're not going to use hops at all. We're going to go for a completely clean, a completely dry finish and see what we get. The reason I've chosen to do this, actually there's two reasons. Number one, back to that recipe we saw on the BlackRock website. They don't actually use hops in their recipe, so I'm going to go with them in this case. But the other reason is when I did the BlackRock lager, which is the green kit, I did dry hop it, and right before I added the hops, I took a trial glass and I tried the trial glass. And I remember going, wow, like the flavour was really clean, really crisp and really amazing. So much so that I was almost tempted in that brew to not use hops and just go through and see what we get. I did in the end use the dry hops, but ever since then I've wanted to come back and do another lager without the dry hops. So that's what we're doing today. All that said, guys, too much talking, not enough brewing. I'm going to get these two brews on, and then I'll see you guys on the other side when we pitch the yeast. Cheers. Hi guys, welcome to the garage. This is the basics brew, which as we mentioned is going to be fermenting in ambient temperatures. Based on the therm strip, it looks as though the current temperature is around about the 26 degrees mark. A little bit warmer than what I would prefer to pitch, but it will keep coming down across the evening. I had said that I thought this would ferment at 18 to 20 in ambient. I might be a smidge optimistic there to the low side, but it will certainly be in the early 20s. I wouldn't expect to see it warmer than that. As mentioned as well, we're going to use the factory yeast that came with the kit. In terms of process for this brew, we pitch the yeast and we let it run. Fermentation will be done when gravity is stable for 2 days in a row. At a guess, I would say we're probably looking at 7 days thereabouts of fermentation. Either way, I will leave this to sit for closer to 2 weeks, which is something I generally do with my brews. Won't be using finings, won't be doing anything else, so I'll let it run its course and then we'll go straight to bottling. All that said, let's get this lid off and get this yeast pitched. There we go guys, brew, yeast in. Whoa. That is it. Way too easy. Gonna get this lid back on and then we will go across and check out the recipe brew. Alright guys, recipe brew is in the temperature control fridge. Target temperature is set at 18.5 degrees. Remember the ideal fermentation temperature range was 18 to 22, so right down the lower end of that. The ambient temperature in the fridge is now 18.7, so from an ambient temperature perspective, spot on where we want to be. Let's get into the fridge and check it out. Alright guys, here we are inside the fridge. What you can see here, my little probe, he's picking up the temperature. I had a look on the firm strip and it looks to be still 24 degrees, which is fine. Ambient temperature inside the fridge is down where we want it at that 18.5. It will continue to bring down the internal temperature of the fermenter and the brew inside. I also don't mind pitching at the high end of a range, although I do appreciate 24 is a little bit above the ideal range. It gives the yeast a bit of support to get started, so I'm happy to chuck the yeast in now, and same with the other brew. Let the temperature continue to drop down to where it's meant to be overnight, and of course we have our M54 Californian lager yeast. Let's get the lid off and get this pitched. Here we go guys, yeast brew, in we go. Too easy, that'll do its thing. This brew we will treat a little bit differently in terms of process. I have mentioned we're not going to use hops, so we don't need to worry about any of that this time. Fermentation, especially in the fridge and in a nice controlled temperature, will most likely take a smidge longer relative to the other brew. So this could well be fermenting for 10 days. But either way, even if it finishes, which would be defined as gravity being stable for 2 days, I'll still leave it in the fermenter for up to 2 weeks before I start to bottle it. It will never do you any harm to let it sit an extra day, 2 or 3 if you've ever got any doubts. If anything, letting it sit longer will normally only give you a better brew, so don't be afraid to be patient. Yeah, with this one, when I am ready to bottle, I'll cold crash. I will use finings. So I will put finings in 48 hours before I bottle. I will then cold crash 24 hours before I bottle, and bottle using 750ml amber crown top, carbonation drops, crown top caps, Bob's your uncle. Yeah, I will do one more very short clip when we drop the finings in. Other than that, I will see you guys soon. Cheers! Hi guys, welcome back to the official taste test for the BlackRock Dry Lager. Couple of brews. What do you reckon we pop these open, get them in the glass, check them out. Alright, this one here is our basics brew, bottle glass, pouring. Here we go guys, check that out. What I'll do, this one at the same time. Recipe brew, bottle glass, pour. here we go guys. 2 brews. How do they look? Alright, really similar colour. Both are very light gold. This one's probably a bit brighter. What I would say for this one, if you look at it, this is our basics brew, is whilst the colour has come up really nicely, it's cleared okay, but it's not fully clear, it's not crystal clear. So remember, we didn't do anything to this. There was no cold crashing. Oh, did I cold crash it? Might have still cold crashed it. Definitely didn't use findings. Whereas this one, if you hold that up, yeah, you can see right through that. So there's a huge amount more clarity coming through in our recipe brew. This one here had the findings, it was cold crashed, so a lot more effort into clearing that up. I think that's still a good result. Like, I'm still, you know, from a clarity perspective, happy with that. It's really nice, but that is exceptional. Interesting with the colour as well, right? Like, I don't know how well this will come up on camera. This one here, our recipe brew, definitely a lot brighter. This one, which will probably be coming through and have changed because of our malt. This one a lot more of a pale gold. Right, both of them really similar. Really similar in terms of our aromas. Very delicate malt character, very delicate aroma, but very much what you would expect from a crisp, a dry, a very classic lager. Basics brew. I went and had a look at the hops that we used in the base malt, which was, and it's published on the BlackRock site, the Green Bullet and Pacific Gem, I think was the other one. So first of all, when you taste this, very delicate malt character, obviously to be expected. What BlackRock don't do is tell us how the hops were used. So they said Pacific Gem and Green Bullet, but they don't tell you in what quantities or how they were added to the boil. Obviously earlier in the boil is going to be bittering, but then your mid and late additions are going to give you some flavour and aroma. Now the reason I bring that up is if you go back to the last review I did on a lager, BlackRock, that also used the Green Bullet hop in the base malt. But the Green Bullet hop, really interesting hop in terms of flavour, like dark fruit, dried fruit, very complex, almost a little bit musky, a little bit of spiciness, a little bit of pepperiness, and that's almost the hint of flavour that I get in this beer as well. But very delicate, it's very nice. Dextrose, as I normally comment, does give it that slightly sweet, to me, slightly sweet tinge, but not necessarily a bad thing. So, quick little story. I caught up with some good friends of ours who we don't see that regularly, certainly don't get a good chance to drink beer regularly with these people. And one of my friends in particular, we tried both these beers. We tried this one first, the Basics brew, and the first comment from him was, it's really easy drinking, which I certainly agree with. It's a very easy to drink brew. I also asked him what he thought about the level of sweetness coming through from the brew. And his reply was that he didn't particularly notice it. And what he meant by that as well was that it was no sweeter, and he specifically said this, it was no sweeter than the beer that he would normally drink himself. So, yeah, interesting comment there. I also, my father-in-law tried this. He's one who's generally a harder critic on my homebrew. He pretty much said the same thing. He didn't mind the sweetness in this one, and he called it pretty good, which I'll take as a big compliment from him. So all in all, that's come up as a really, really nice brew. Recipe brew. So I've already said, like, clarity, it's picture perfect. There's a lot more clarity going on. The colour is definitely brighter. Big difference on this one is there's more malt character coming through in the aroma. And in the flavour. This blonde malt extract, I'd never used it before, so it was really, really interesting. If you go to the BlackRock site, it does suggest this blonde extract is particularly good for supporting a dry finish. I would agree with that. It's relative to some of the other malt extracts I've used, it is a lot drier. It lacks that sweetness. It does increase the malt character, but not out of, if you think about what's normal for a lager, I would say this is at the, I guess, the upper end of what I would expect in terms of the weight of malt character in a lager, but it's still well within norms and really, really nice. The other thing that I would say is the blonde. When I went into that on the website and had a look at a bit more detail, it's made, that malt extract is made with 100% lager malts and some very pale malts. So it's obviously really, really well suited to this style of beer, and I think that's come through in the finish. Both of these brews are 9 weeks old now. First tried them at 4 weeks and were both good. I think they've definitely gotten better with age. This one in particular is really on point now. It is a very sharp, very clean, very crisp lager. If you wanted to hop this, and interestingly this is similar feedback, went back and watched the last lager video I did last night, just preparing for this conversation. One of the things which I said about the last lager was if you wanted to hop it, I thought that a hint of citrus would have set this off. And I'd pretty much say the same for this. If you did want to lightly hop this brew, a hint of citrus, perhaps from Cascade, would go, I reckon, go a mile. Similar to what I said on the other brew, BlackRock actually suggested using the USO5 yeast in here. That will give a small hint of citrus as well, so that might have given you that. The other thing I'd be really, really keen to do is to do this with the BlackRock Ultralight Multi Extract. I think that would, the blonde has worked really, really well. I think the Ultralight would go off incredibly as well. If you ask me which one of these brews has come out better, in this case I would say it's the recipe brew. What we were brewing was a dry lager, and I think the blonde malt has really, really set this off. It has given it that slightly drier finish, but the flavour is also a lot cleaner and a lot easier going. So I'm a fan of the recipe brew in this case. I would say if you're a lager fan, this would easily come in at 7 or 8 on the Home Brew Republic brew scale, maybe even higher, because beauty is in the eye of the brew holder. But that doesn't mean this is a bad brew. I think in the context of what we were doing, the sweet finish that the dextrose has given this just comes away from being a dry lager. It's still an incredibly nice brew, and as one of my friends said, very, very easy drinking and certainly a good looking beer. So for me, I would happily go 6.5, 7.5 on the Home Brew Republic brew scale for the basics brew. All that said, what else have I been up to? 3 things coming up. Now if you go back to, might have been the last video, it was the Czech Pilsner video. One of the things I said was the question that could be asked is what's the difference between dextrose versus liquid brewing sugar versus enhancer versus liquid malt extract. And I wanted to answer that question. So I've gone and done that. I've brewed 4 brews using the same kit, but each brew using a different one of those ingredients. And what that's going to mean we can do is put 4 glasses on a bench and check out what the difference is in the final product based on the fermentation fuel we did. BlackRock also dropped an awesome range of new kits. They call them the bag in a box, I think they've called them. They're exceptional. The reviews that I'm seeing coming through online, like in terms of posts that people are putting into forums, are all positive. I have mine out of the fermenter, it's in bottles, it's bottle maturing now. I think it's been in bottles 2 weeks. I am going to leave it until it hits that 4-week mark to have my first taste, but even like the taste tests out of trial jars were coming off exceptional. So I'm really looking forward to that review. And of course those kits are quite different. The brew in a bag, it's a bit of a different approach to the extract brewing process we're normally used to. So we'll talk through that in the video. The other one I'm particularly excited about, which is in my fermenter now, is a BlackRock Pale Ale. So a couple of reasons. Number one, I love pale ales. I love beer in general, but I like pale ales. I found it's like the craft beer survey, Australian craft beer survey, and pale ales are the #1 most preferred or most drunk beer in Australia. Now, interestingly, the next most drunk or most preferred beer was the New England IPA. And not only was it the second most preferred and / drunk, but it had the largest increase in popularity, and this was the 2022 survey, so it's last year's results. So what I've done is I've taken the BlackRock Pale Ale kit, it's the orange can. I've brewed 2 brews, as I always do, one basics with a twist, because what I'm doing is I'm doing that as a low carb brew. Now that second brew I'm doing as a New England IPA. Now, if you're asking what a New England IPA is, it's obviously an IPA. It wasn't invented in England, it does come from the US, but it is actually a very, very young beer style. It was either 2004 or 2008 that it was invented. It's a massive, big, hoppy, juicy brew with a lower level of bitterness relative to your traditional sort of US IPA or US APA. But I'm super looking forward to that. So that's the next 3 brew reviews that you've got coming up. I've also got something a little bit different brewing. Don't want to say too much about that yet. Yeah, okay, I'll talk about that later on another video. What I will talk about is what I'm going to get down in the next month, and the main brew I'm going to get down is a stout. Now, I've never ever done a stout before. I've gone and found an extract brewing recipe which is yeah, I'm just going to say well off pest. It's bringing in quite a few different ingredients which I wouldn't normally brew with, so keep an eye out for that. It'll be 4 or 5 videos down the line from this point. All that said, guys, I really appreciate you checking this out. More and more of you know that I reply in the comments, so please feel free to drop a comment. I always engage. Heaps of you are tracking down the website, homebrewrepublic.co.nz. Really appreciate that. Obviously there's contact forms, there's emails, all that kind of good stuff there. Always welcome to reach out. Love engaging. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, helps us out. Hit the subscribe button. All that said, guys, I want to say thank you. Cheers. Catch you next time.
Cheers.